I wanted to talk to you today about greeting cards and how easy they are to make. And once you have the supplies that you need, it's much less expensive than going to the store. You can always make a greeting card for an event that you weren't aware of, short notice. It's great like that. But there are some tools that you will need to have to be able to make something like this simple card right here. This card is just a store-bought shell, basically. I do cheat. I buy packages of cards that are ready to be decorated. It's just a little bit easier that way for me to be able to do it. You don't have to do that. You can use your cardstock that you have on hand, and you can cut and fold it into many different sizes and shapes, but I like starting with this. It just makes it a little bit easier for me. This also has a couple of elements on it. That the flower in the middle is a packet of flowers that I bought. They were probably on sale for 50% off at Hobby Lobby or at Joann's. They've got great card making supplies there. The other things are things that I had on hand. I did use a die cutter to make this little circle here. It's a metal die cutter. I won't be doing that when I show you the example. I'll probably just use my Cameo to be able to cut that. It's just a little bit easier for me. But there are some tools that you need to have if you want to make greeting cards. I highly recommend them. This embossing detail that's on here, you can only really achieve that if you use embossing folders. And those folders are used with a machine called, well, I use the Big Kick. Cuttlebug makes them by Cricut. There's lots of different brands. I happen to like the Sizzix Big Kick. That's the one that I use. I can show you that. Here are two tools that are vital if you're going to be doing card making. I like the guillotine cutter. I know that a lot of people like the rotary cutter, but for me, I could never get an actual straight edge, and so everything kind of came out cattywampus, and that is not what we want. There's nothing worse than something that's cattywampus. It needs to be as square as possible. And the Big Kick is an embosser, and it also will cut dies. But like I said, what I have found is buying those dies, and I do have several, not a whole ton. You can see they're magnetic and they're stuck to my board. I do have some, but I don't use them very often. And really, they're expensive to buy, and they're not as easy to use as the biggest investment that you will probably make. And that is a die cutter, and I use a Silhouette Cameo. And I also have a portrait. The Silhouette portrait is less expensive than the Cameo, and it works just as well. It's the same, essentially the same brand. Everything works the same. It's just smaller, and you can get your images from Silhouette for 99 cents. Sometimes they're on sale 20% off. It's just much cheaper to buy the cuts that you want to make from Silhouette. And that's what I'm going to do to make this little card. So here we are. And I used just some pink cardstock for the background and white for the embossing. Now I have standard size cards that I usually use, so I kind of know the sizes of my mat and what size I want the embossing to be and so forth. In this particular case, and I write everything down. On this side I have my, I guess those are, let's see, my 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That's what these cards are when I start out. So I know that my next cut down will be 4 by 5 1/4 and so forth. I go by quarter increments, and I believe that's really how most people do it. Even though I make tons of cards, I always keep this by my cutter just so I can remember what I'm doing when I'm cutting the stuff out for my cards. In this particular case, this card You want to, if you don't, I mean, if you're buying cards, then you know the size of your cards. It's written right there on the package. But I didn't have the package for this any longer, so I needed to measure. And this card is 5.5, or excuse me, 5.25 by 5.25. So I know that the colored matte that I want, and I have it represented here by saying dark, but whatever color matte that I want to use, I'm using a white card, so my next size down is going to be a color. I used pink in this case. I'm going to use a light green for the next one, and so I know that that cut is going to be 5 by 5. So I come over to my cutter and I take the paper that I want, and I'm going to cut it down to 5 by 5. I've got this nifty little grid here. I have my ruler, and I put it on 5 inches, and then I put the paper that I'm using in. I just make sure that it's tight against the backstop and square, and cut down. And this is easy, it's 5 by 5, so I don't have to make another cut, or I don't have to adjust my stop because it's still 5 inches. So I do the same thing, and essentially there is my mat. And you can see that the mat is just ever so slightly smaller than the perimeter of the card. Now I want to do the embossing element, and what size I need for that. Now generally I would go down 1/4 inch to get my next cut, but on this particular card I went down 1/2 inch. So my next cut on this is 4.5. So I'll take my white cardstock, and I'm going to go 4.5 by 4.5. So I'll move the backstop just a little bit down to 4.5. Since I bent this paper, that's going to be my waist, so I'll put that through first. To 4.5. Again, I don't need to move it because it's going to be 4.5 by 4.5. And this is where the embossing element is going to come in. I am using a Cuttlebug embossing folder, and it's just some dots, which looks really cute on just about any card. And I go ahead and I just kind of line it up. I want it to, you know, you want it to be straight. You don't want it to be going off in a strange direction. So I go ahead and try to line it up as best I can to make sure that it's going to come out right. And then let me come over here to my embossing folder. I'm no expert on the embossing machines. I just know what works for me, so I'm using the Big Kick. It comes with this tray that you use with it. I've got both of the tabs up, so it's not going to emboss so hard that it's going to actually tear the cardstock. This one works for me. It may not be exactly what you might hear somebody else do, but it absolutely works for me, and so that's what I go with. Put it back here. And then when you take it out of the folder, you have this nicely embossed card. And so that will be the next element of this card. And you can see that it actually fits quite nicely. And here's the way it would be coming out once we get it attached. And I do kind of measure this as I go along just to make sure that I haven't done something strange. You can see how that is looking. And then, now in this particular card, I used a piece of lace. This was some excess lace that I had. You'll have lots of leftovers when you start buying rolls of ribbon and things like that. So I had this lace ribbon that was left over from another project, and I think that I've used all of that, so I need to make a decision about what lace I would like to use in the background of that. There's nothing that says that you have to, but every little embellishment that you put on your card just makes it look that much better. And let me go over here to my ribbons and see what I've got that might work. Okay, I've decided on a yellow ribbon, I'm using a yellow flower, and again, this is just a flower that I purchased. It was in a package of things, so I've decided on a yellow flower for my card. So I thought a yellow ribbon would be good because the the flower's not going to be sitting directly on the ribbon, even though that still wouldn't be bad. So what I'm going to do though is measure and cut my ribbon to where it's going to be even. And this doesn't have, it's not an exact science, and I go a little bit over, then I'll trim it up later. But I just want to be sure that it's enough. Just going to go ahead and trim that like that. And like I said, I'll get that later. And many times what you'll do is you'll only go as far as this outer mat. When these two things are assembled, you'll go as far as this outer mat. You'll tuck it under. And that way, and we may do that. On this one I went all the way across to the white part of the card, but I may end up doing that once I assemble it. And now I need to go to my Silhouette software and decide what cut I want to have. I'm not going to go into any sort of a tutorial on the Silhouette. I am, again, not an expert on the Silhouette at all. I do know how to use the software to pick a shape. I'm going to pick a shape and cut it out, and then we'll assemble the card. Okay, now we're going to assemble the card, which is super easy. Just a matter of using a tape runner of some sort. And I already went ahead and taped the embossing mat to the dark colored mat that we were using. And I went ahead and I put on the ribbon. You can see I just taped it on each end on the back, so it's really secure. And really you're just eyeballing that. When you put that ribbon on there, there's nothing that says that it has to be perfect. Then the shape that I cut on the Silhouette is here. And you just simply run some glue on that shape. And a lot of times if you're doing something intricate, you can use different types of glue sticks and things to get all of those edges. But for the purposes of just showing you how to do this card, I'm not going to do that. Then you just try to get it, again, as even as possible. So that's what we've got so far. And then you just take your embellishment, whatever that embellishment is. In this case, it's this yellow rose. Decide how you want it to go on the card. I'll just do it like this. And there we've got everything ready to go. Not sure how I like that. I think I'm going to take it that way. And it's ready to go on our card base. Just be sure that when you put it on your card base that you don't accidentally put it on upside down. Let's say there were words on this. I've done that. You get it all glued down and you realize your card's upside down and you've wasted the whole thing. So just for your own sake, double check that. And go and do your tape on the back. Did I just run out of tape? Oh dear. Just ran out of tape, so I'm going to grab some glue. And this is just tacky glue. Works just as fine. And you take it, again, just double check, make sure you're good to go on where your card is. Yeah, I'm going to do it this way. And then you just want to be sure that you're even around the edges. Glue that down. And there you have it. Pretty simple. I hope you try it.